My dad called me a burden and kicked me out at 17 to make room for his stepdaughter, so I cut him off, and what I did next left him trembling. I was 17, barely holding myself together and drowning in grief. She was the glue that held our family together, and without her, everything fell apart almost immediately. My father, who had always seemed reliable, didn't even let the dust settle. For months after the funeral, he announced that he was getting married to a woman named Scarlett. Scarlett was no stranger. She was a coworker he'd been friendly with for years. At the time, I thought it was just his way of coping, throwing himself into something to avoid dealing with his feelings. But even then, it felt fast, too fast. I wasn't the only one who thought that. Relatives whispered at family gatherings, old friends stopped coming around, and even my Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister, called him out on how disrespectful it looked. But he brushed it all off, saying it was his life and his rules. Scarlett wasn't the only new arrival. She had a daughter, Brittany, who was 16, just a year younger than me. They moved into our house within weeks of the wedding. I didn't even have time to adjust to my mother's absence before this new family came storming in. At first, I tried to make the best of it. Brittany and I were forced to share a room because Scarlett insisted on turning my mom's old office into her own space. It's better for everyone that way, my dad told me. Brittany acted sweet around him, calling him dad within a month and baking cookies like a sitcom daughter. Scarlett played the role of the perfect wife, doting on my dad in public and throwing subtle jabs at me in private. They pretended to be a perfect family unit, but I could see through it. The tension at home was unbearable. Brittany never respected my space, treating our shared room like it was all hers. She threw her clothes everywhere, played music when I was trying to sleep, and even went through my things once or twice. Scarlett was no better. She had this passive-aggressive way of making me feel like I didn't belong, like I was some remnant of my father's past life that she had to tolerate. The only thing that kept me sane was school and work. I had a part-time job at a local diner and saved what little money I could, but even that didn't prepare me for what my dad dropped on me one night. It was just the two of us at home. Scarlett and Brittany had gone shopping. My dad called me into the living room, which immediately made me nervous. He rarely wanted to talk anymore, unless it was to lecture me about something. But this time he seemed nervous, avoiding eye contact as he began. "Look, there are 4 of us here now," he said. "I know it's hard for you to share a room with Brittany, so I was thinking..." He paused, as if waiting for me to fill in the blanks. When I didn't, he continued. "You're going to be 18 soon, and it's time for you to start living like a man. Get a job, support yourself, and move out." I just stared at him. At first, I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He even suggested that I could leave the very next day. "It will be good for you," he added, as if kicking me out of the house was some kind of motivational pep talk. I couldn't say anything. I just nodded and went to the bathroom. I don't often cry, but that night I couldn't stop. The next day, I packed my things and left. My dad didn't even try to say goodbye. He just acted like it was a normal day. I went to my Aunt Sarah's house, not knowing what else to do. She was shocked when I told her what had happened, but she didn't hesitate to let me stay with her. Her husband and son took me in as well, and for the first time in months, I felt like someone actually cared about what I was going through. That was the day I realized I was on my own. Living with Aunt Sarah was like a breath of fresh air. She and Uncle Chris treated me like family, something I hadn't felt in a long time. My cousin Jake, who was about my age, quickly became like a brother to me. He knocked on my door to see if I wanted to shoot hoops or grab a burger. It was small stuff, but after everything I'd been through, it mattered. Still, I couldn't shake the bitterness I felt toward my dad. Every time I thought about him kicking me out of the house, I felt this mixture of anger and shame. I hated that I had cried over it. I hated that I even cared. But most of all, I hated how easily he had replaced me with Scarlett and Brittany. Aunt Sarah told me I could stay as long as I needed, but I didn't want to freeload. I took every shift I could at the diner, saving every penny. I even started doing odd jobs on the weekends, mowing lawns, walking dogs, whatever paid. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me busy and gave me a sense of control. By the time I turned 18, I was juggling 3 different jobs. It was exhausting, but it felt good to know that I was on my own. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Chris had been my biggest cheerleaders. They helped me open a savings account, taught me how to budget, and even co-signed for my first car, a beat-up Honda Civic. Word of my dad's new life spread quickly through our family. At every holiday or gathering, someone would bring it up. Apparently, Scarlett and Brittany were still playing the perfect family act, but cracks were beginning to show. Brittany was skipping school and spending all her time with a sketchy boyfriend, while Scarlett had blown through most of my dad's savings on shopping sprees and spa days. "You're better off without them," Aunt Sarah told me one night, and I knew she was right. By the time I was 20, I finally felt like I had my life together. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was making about $5,000 a month from a mix of freelance work and part-time gigs. I had a decent place to live, a reliable car, and enough savings to take the occasional weekend trip. Life was stable, even enjoyable. I barely spoke to my father during those years. We'd exchange a quick happy birthday or Merry Christmas on the phone, but that was it. I never saw him in person. I wasn't ready, and frankly, I didn't think he deserved it. Then, out of the blue, he called me. It was a typical Tuesday night. I had just gotten home from work when my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen, and for a second I thought about ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," I replied, my voice flat. "Hey, son," he said, as if nothing had happened. "I was hoping we could talk in person." I hesitated. "Why?" "There's something important I need to discuss with you," he said. "Can we meet at Aunt Sarah and Uncle Chris's house tomorrow?" I didn't want to say yes, but part of me wanted to hear what he had to say, so I said yes. The next evening, I drove over to Aunt Sarah's house, my stomach in knots. He was waiting for me outside, leaning against his car like he didn't have a care in the world. He smiled when he saw me, but I didn't smile back. We started with small talk. He asked how I was, what I'd been up to, how work was going. I kept my answers vague, not giving him much to go on. After a few minutes, he got to the point. "I've seen some of your Instagram posts," he said. "You've been traveling, buying nice things. You seem to be doing well." I shrugged. "I'm doing well." He nodded, then hesitated before saying, "I was hoping you could help me with something." Here it was. I knew there must be a reason for this sudden interest. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It's Brittany," he said, as if I should have seen it coming. "She wants to go to college, but tuition is expensive. Scarlett and I are having trouble covering it." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but he was serious. "You have money now," he continued. "You're her brother. Don't you think you should help?" I couldn't help myself. I laughed, not just a little chuckle, but a full, bitter laugh. "Are you serious?" I said. "You kicked me out of the house to make room for her, and now you want me to pay for her education?" He tried to backtrack and say it wasn't like that, but I wasn't having it. "You made it clear years ago where I stood in your life," I said. "Don't expect anything from me now." He called me selfish, said I was holding a grudge, but I didn't care. I told him we were done, got in my car, and drove away. I thought that was the end of it. I had said my piece, driven away, and fully expected my dad to disappear from my life again. But it wasn't over. 2 weeks later, Scarlett called. I barely recognized her voice at first because I hadn't spoken to her directly in years. She skipped the pleasantries and got right to the point. "Your father's been a wreck since your little stunt," she said, her tone sharp. "He barely eats. He's stressed all the time. Do you really hate him that much?" "Scarlett, I don't know what you think is going on here," I said, already regretting picking up the phone. "I'm not paying for Brittany's college, and I'm not coming back to this circus of a family. That's not what this is about," she snapped. "This is about you ruining him. He just wants to make things right, and you're making it impossible." I hung up. I didn't want to get sucked into her drama, but the conversation was bothering me more than I wanted to admit. The thought of my father barely eating made me feel guilty, no matter how much I hated what he had done. I couldn't sleep that night. Part of me wondered if I should have handled things differently. Not for Scarlett or Brittany, but for my father. Maybe he really was trying to make amends, even if he went about it in the worst possible way. Then, out of nowhere, another twist came crashing into my life. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was working on a freelance project when Aunt Sarah called. Her voice was shaky, almost panicked. "Did you hear about your dad?" she asked. "No." "Why?" I said, my chest tightening. "He's in the hospital. Scarlett called me. I just sat there for a second trying to process what she'd said. Apparently, he had collapsed at work and had been rushed to the emergency room. The doctors thought it was a heart attack. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, guilt, maybe all of it. But I knew one thing, I wasn't ready to face him. Still, Aunt Sarah urged me to go. "You'll regret it if you don't," she said. So I went. Walking into the hospital room felt surreal. My father looked so much older than I remembered. He was pale, hooked up to machines, and barely resembled the man I grew up with. Scarlett sat next to him, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while Brittany scrolled through her phone in the corner. He turned his head when he saw me, and his eyes lit up for a moment. "You came," he said weakly. I nodded but said nothing. Scarlett didn't waste any time. She stood up and put on her best concerned wife act. "He asked for you," she said. "You should talk." She and Brittany left, leaving us alone. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." It caught me off guard. He looked genuinely remorseful, like he was carrying the weight of his mistakes. I didn't know what to say. "I was wrong to kick you out," he went on. "I was wrong about a lot of things. I didn't know how to handle things after your mom died." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But part of me couldn't forget all those years of neglect, the way he had chosen Scarlett and Brittany over me. "I'm glad you're doing well," he said. "I see it on Instagram. You've made a good life for yourself." I nodded again, still not sure how to respond. Before I could say anything, the door burst open and Scarlett stormed in, looking furious. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "Why are you apologizing? He's the one who abandoned this family." I froze. "Are you serious?" I said, finally finding my voice. "You think you're the victim here?" She shot back, ignoring me and glaring at my father. "You're the one who made this family fall apart." It was chaos. My dad tried to calm her down, but his voice was too weak. Brittany, who had come back, at some point, was laughing at something on her phone, completely disconnected from what was happening. I couldn't take it anymore. I left the room, my mind racing. That night, Aunt Sarah called me again. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice hesitant. "What now?" I asked, pulling myself together. "It's about Scarlett. Apparently, she's been cheating on your dad." I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. Sarah explained that Scarlett had been dating a rich guy behind my dad's back for months. She had only stuck around because she thought my dad could still provide for Brittany. But now that his health was failing and his finances were drying up, she was planning to leave him. "She's leaving tomorrow," Sarah said. She already told Brittany. I didn't know whether to feel angry or vindicated. This woman had destroyed my family, and now she was going to walk away like none of it mattered. The next day, it happened. Scarlett packed her things, took Brittany, and left my father alone. For the first time in years, he called me, not to ask for money or help, but just to talk. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. I didn't have an answer for him. After Scarlett left, my dad hit rock bottom, and Sarah told me that he texted her almost every day, apologizing for everything he'd done. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I needed time to process everything: the hospital visit, Scarlett's betrayal, and his sudden change in attitude. To my surprise, my father began to recover. His health improved faster than anyone expected. When he was discharged, he looked stronger, though the weight of everything that had happened was still etched on his face. I didn't visit him after he came home, but I kept hearing updates from Aunt Sarah. Apparently, Scarlett's boyfriend, that rich guy she'd been seeing behind my dad's back, had been coming to their house almost every day while my dad was in the hospital. He hadn't even tried to hide it. Scarlett and Brittany were parading the guy right in front of my dad, and the neighbors had started talking. I wasn't sure whether to feel sorry for my dad or be satisfied that he was finally getting a taste of the chaos he had brought into my life. Either way, he was alone now, and it seemed that he was finally realizing the consequences of his actions. One night I got a call from him. For once he didn't sound angry or defensive. His voice was calm, almost hesitant. "I know I don't deserve this," he began, "but can you come over? I just want to talk. No drama, no demands, just talk." I wasn't sure why, but I said yes. When I walked into the house, it was like walking into a ghost town. The place was eerily quiet, stripped of Scarlett's gaudy decorations and Brittany's endless clutter. My father was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee as if it held all the answers. He looked up as I walked in, and for the first time in years I saw the dad I used to know, the one from before everything fell apart. "I screwed up," he said without any preamble. "I let you down. I let everybody down. I didn't say anything, just pulled out a chair and sat across from him. I thought I was doing the right thing back then," he went on. "I thought starting over with Scarlett would make me happy, but it just tore us apart. And I see that now. I see how much I hurt you." He didn't cry, but his voice broke as he spoke. "I never should have thrown you out. I never should have put her in front of you. I'm so sorry." For the first time, it felt like he really meant it. Not just words to smooth things over, not an apology to manipulate me into doing what he wanted. He looked genuinely sorry, like he'd been carrying the weight of his mistakes and was finally ready to admit them. "I know I can't make up for the past," he said, "but I want to try, if you'll let me." I sat there for a long time, staring at the man who had once been my hero, the man who had also caused me so much pain. I didn't know if I could forgive him. Not yet. But part of me wanted to believe that people could change. "I appreciate the apology," I finally said, But I'm not ready to go back. I've built a life with Aunt Sarah, and I'm happy there. He nodded, his shoulders slumping slightly, but he didn't argue. I understand, he said. Just don't shut me out completely, please. I promised I wouldn't, and I meant it. But I also knew I had to keep my distance, at least for now. As I left the house, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and maybe even a glimmer of hope. My dad wasn't perfect, he never would be. But for the first time in years, it felt like he was really trying. 6 months passed, and things began to change. Not dramatically, but enough to feel different. My weekly visits with my father became routine. At first, they were awkward. The conversations stayed on the surface. Work, the weather, how the neighbors were doing. But over time, we began to connect again, little by little. He seemed different, calmer, almost humbled. The house felt different too. It was like a piece of my mom had been brought back. Her old photos on the walls, the little figurines she used to collect neatly lined up on a shelf. My dad even mentioned how he'd started taking care of her old garden in the backyard. One day, he surprised me. I've been thinking, he said as we sat in the living room. I owe a lot of people an apology, not just you, but everyone I've hurt. It wasn't like him to admit such a thing. My father had always been stubborn, the kind of person who rarely said he was wrong. I want to bring everyone together, he continued, just once, to say what I have to say. I wasn't sure what to think, but I agreed to show up. When the time came a few weeks later, he hosted a dinner at a local restaurant. He invited Aunt Sarah, Uncle Chris, and a bunch of relatives I hadn't seen in years. Some of them still seemed skeptical of him, unsure if he was serious about making amends. The dinner began like any other family gathering. Polite small talk, passing plates of food, a few awkward silences. But after everyone had eaten, my father stood up and cleared his throat. I want to thank you all for coming, he began, his voice steady but low. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've been selfish. I've let people down, especially my own son. He looked at me, his expression soft. I thought I was doing what was best for me, but I hurt the people who mattered most. The room fell silent as he continued. I know I can't go back and undo what I did, but I want you all to know how deeply sorry I am. He paused and took a deep breath. And I miss her every single day. He didn't have to say her name. Everyone knew he meant my mother. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no tears or outbursts, but you could feel the weight of his words. For the first time in years, he wasn't deflecting or making excuses. He was just honest. After that night, the tension that had hung over our family for so long began to ease. Things weren't perfect, too much had happened for that, but they were better. My father stayed in the house, working part-time and spending his weekends in the garden or visiting old friends. As for me, I decided it was time to move out of Aunt Sarah's house. I found a small apartment near where I worked. It wasn't much, just a little one-bedroom with a leaky faucet and creaky floors, but it felt like a fresh start. Aunt Sarah and Jake helped me move in, and when we were done, we sat on the floor eating pizza and laughing. Life went on for everyone. My dad and I stayed in touch and still saw each other every week. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Chris remained the rock of the family, always there to support me when I needed them. The resentment I had carried for so long began to dissipate, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Life slowly settled into a rhythm. My father and I continued our weekly visits, and while things would never be the same, the anger I'd carried for years was gone. He seemed determined to be better, not just for me, but for himself. I stayed in my small apartment, enjoying the independence it gave me. Aunt Sarah still checked in regularly, sometimes dropping by with homemade meals or inviting me to family dinners. Even though I'd moved out, I knew I'd always have a place with her if I needed it. My father stayed busy, tending to the garden and catching up with old friends. He even joined a local book club, which was so unlike him that I almost didn't believe it when he told me. One Saturday, as we sat on his back porch drinking coffee, he said, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about your mom lately. She wouldn't be proud of the way I handled things, but I hope she'd be proud of what I'm trying to do now." I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded. Sometimes words weren't necessary. We were far from perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were okay.